Welcome. This is another good morning here, and hopefully, you are having a great morning as well. Today, we're going to be working on the section 2 flower part and showing you a couple of other techniques of machine applique with that and some embellishment issues today. But first, just want to share with you, packing is almost done. I've got some few things in the quilt room and a few garage things, and then the moving truck comes on Tuesday, and so we'll be in our new home on Wednesday. So it's been a pretty crazy busy week here, but I did manage to get the flowers on and want to talk about that just a little bit. So again, I just pinned the vase part to the block, and I moved it in a little bit from the edge right here, so that it looked like it was, a little bit more solid on there. That just made me feel better. That's all. And then, I was able to put the flowers on in the way that I wanted them, leaving the vase off. Then I completed my section 2 blocks and then sewed section 2 to section 1. And now I can add the vase. It's not stitched down at this point in time, but it's ready to be stitched as soon as I get set up with shop up north. So I've got section 2 there, and so today what we're going to work on is that the flower pot that sits on the step that will be added right here, along this next step that goes down in terms of the block. So let's look at the process a little bit of the section 2 flowers. It is the vase, this little vase, and 5 flowers that are the picture's not coming up. I don't understand that. Let me go back and see if I can I'm not sure what's happening there with that the picture is not showing up. I'm really sorry. I don't know why. The camera seems to be working fine because I moved it down to that, but we'll find a way to make this work until I can figure out what's happened to that. So we've got this little vase right here and these 5 little flowers that we're going to be working on today in terms of embellishment. And hopefully I can get the screen at a position where we can see it and get that to work for you. And my apologies for whatever is happening there. So that at least you can see some of what's going on this. You have your die cut pieces, and if you have the die cut, remember that the 2 leaves, one of those needs to be mirror imaged. So how you cut that and put that on your die machine for mirror image, make sure that you have that correct. And all right, I'm just trying to figure out how to get that back. So what I do sometimes when I'm working on this is that I will use my light box, because these 2 right here, these 2 leaves or stems, need to be also mirror imaged. So if I don't have a light box or that, I trace them on the back side and I just flip my paper over and recopy them. I am using the Select Applique paper that is, and the reason that I really like this particular paper to use is because this side has the fusible on it, and with the camera hopefully you can see a little bit of that fusible, and then this side is when you peel it off, the sticky side of that is repositionable. And when I'm using raw edge applique or making those types of movements with it, what's really nice about that is that I can get everything in place before I iron it down. And that is very helpful when I'm doing applique. And especially, it can be really helpful. I'm doing turned applique for mine. But if I was putting this, I had to keep repositioning until I got it into a position that I liked. And so that seemed to work pretty well for me on that. I've got one more thing I can try here. If you can just be patient with me for just a second. Nope, that didn't work. Sorry about that. So, because the work that we're going to do today is mostly hand work, so it's going to be a little bit tricky here, and to get that figured out, how I can get you back into seeing the camera. It's just not working here today. So I have drawn my pieces onto my fusible, and then I took those fusibles and rough cut them out onto the fusible paper, and then I adhered them to the fabric that I was going to be using for the flower. The flowers are a there's a circle, and in the center of that circle is going to be the little leaf shape that's going to go in there, and want to talk a little bit about embellishment with that as well today. So what is going to happen now is I need to take my scissors, and now I'm going to cut directly on that line all the way around. So and I'm going to just ask John a question before I do that cutting, because he says you can see two different cameras, and I'm not sure why there's two different cameras. And so, maybe John, you can tell me what I need to do about that. So, but in the meantime, I'm going to work with the scissors, and I am going to cut exactly on that line. As I cut this out, sometimes computers and technology is wonderful, and sometimes it isn't. And it was working just fine a little bit ago, and now it's not. And I wish I was more. I really like these scissors, by the way. They really fit in the hand nicely, and they cut beautifully. And I know that I've probably talked about this with you before, but if you cut keeping the sweet spot of your scissors where you're cutting on, you get a really nice smooth cut around uh, your circles, which I pretty much very much like. So now I have my circle and I have my leaf shape. So what's going to happen now is that I am going to fuse these two together and center that, because that's what I'm going to, that's the flower part of this. And I'm using different fabric than my red because I haven't chosen it. And unfortunately, some of it got packed. And so I'm just using a different one as an example today. So let me fuse one of those on. And when I work on this type of thing, I like to use a pin or something to get it started in the middle so I can get that paper off easily. So that rips it very nicely. And then you can see that now I have this sticky side. And so when I place it onto my fabric, let me see. All right, John says you guys can see them. So let me just go down here back where I'm working, but I don't see anything on my camera. And I'll still hold it up until I hear back from maybe him. So this is now on my, but it's, as you can tell, it's stuck, but it's repositionable. And that makes it really nice for when I want to, you know, put it in a different place or resize it or re-sew it. Not re-sew it. What did I say that for? I'm not going to re-sew it. I'm going to reposition it. Because this isn't looking like it's working correctly, I'm befuddled. All right, so now I have my flower made, and I can do some repositioning. I could change it up, whatever I need to in the meantime. So I want to talk about embellishing and possibly try to show you, you know, some of what I'm doing is in terms of embellishing. But the other thing that I want to say about the circles, interestingly enough, with the Applipops, the larger one, the inside is exactly the size of this circle. So you could use an Applipop to do your tracing, or if you're doing the needle turn, you could do use the Applipop for the needle turn applique too, and you get this, you know, you get a lovely round circle using those Applipops. And if you've never used them before, you have your circle, you put your ring over the top, you put that in the center, and then what happens, actually you put right side down, you put the Applipop in the circle and you press it in, trim it, trim the excess fabric off, and then you're going to have that nice circle that comes out in the center after you have trimmed and pressed this all the way around. And the Karen K Buckley Perfect Circles work really nicely too for that, and they're exactly the same size as the circles that you need for today for those flowers. So for next time, you're going to be creating your vase, and you're going to be creating these flowers on to that, but you're not going to put your vase on um, until we make next week's, or in 2 weeks, the next section of blocks, so that we can use the vase to determine where the flowers are going to go and where the leaves are going to go. But we're going to work on this next section before we put that on. And then after that, we'll work on sunflowers and work our way through that. What is really nice with the flower is that now in here, we have an area that we can embellish along, and I have some embellishment stitches that I really like to put in there to add. You can put beading. I like the fly stitch, and I don't know if I can do a fly stitch holding it up. I can try to do that, but I don't know if I can. I was planning on sharing that with you today. Around the outside is also really nice to have the fly stitch coming out here, and then at each top put a bead, or at the bottom, because it'll, with a fly stitch, you're kind of going to have a V shape, and at the bottom or at the top of that you can drop in a bead. You can do lazy daisies around the outside and give it a real flower look to that. And if you guys will give me just a minute, I am going to answer or make a call to John and see if he can help me figure this out. So give me a second. Hi. But can you see my hands? This is the camera that's down, but when I put my hands there, I don't see it. Okay, then this is back to me. Right. Are you seeing just a picture, or are you seeing my hands? Okay. Okay. Just a moment. Technical difficulties, people. All right, that did not change anything. I do. Um, and they were all fine, and I can see the picture, but I can't, I mean, if I move or put something there, nothing shows up. No, it's not working either. Yeah, everything's frozen, and that just happened. So, okay. All right. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry about that technical, and can't seem to get the cameras to unfreeze today, and very sorry about that. We'll have it fixed. So I'm just gonna hold things up as best I can and show you what I plan to do for today. I am going to also show you a leaf pattern. A stitch that I like to do around the leaf is a slanted kind of let me just draw it out, because I think that's going to be the best way, because to try to do it, and I'm going to do it on the paper, um, so that you can see what I'm talking about. And I will review all of this, I promise. But I like to take the blanket stitch and have it come out, and I will blanket stitch that along here, but I will come at it with an angle, and I won't come out very far, and it gives it, especially with like roses and a few other flowers, it gives it a little bit of dimension, and it looks really nice coming along the leaf pattern. And that's what I was hoping to do for you. And let me just show you on the Y. And explain to you. I will, again, I promise I will show these again as soon as I figure out what's happened to my camera. Um, and in 2 weeks it should be all fixed. So this is a fly stitch. And what I really like about this fly stitch, if I was going around the flower, for example, on this one, and I was putting that all the way around, it gives it kind of a leaf look. And then up here, if I can point correctly, um, I can drop a bead right there at the top. I can also drop one like in the V part right here, or even in where that comes down on the side. So, you know, there's different things that you can do with the fly stitch. And then the lazy daisy stitch also gives you a little bit of that look, because you're going to have these lazy daisies coming out on the side, if you desire. Um, so, and the stitch for a fly stitch is you would come up here, you would go down, you would come up on this side. So these two are straight across from each other, and I'm having trouble finding my pen in the right place. So I would come up here, I would go down there, I would leave a loop, and then I would come back up right at the edge of the leaf and catch that thread, which gives me the V. And then I take another stitch into the flower or the leaf, and that gives me the bottom part of the Y. Now for a lazy daisy, if you've never made one before, you come up, again you leave a loop, you put your needle back in almost in the same spot that you came out of, and come up as far up as you want your flowers or petal leaf to be, and you catch that again and go straight back down so that you catch the thread on that. And that's a lazy daisy for that particular stitch. Also, the lazy daisy is also the way you make a chain stitch, except that you go in a straight line or around the flower on that, which makes that really nice. You can make single lazy daisy stitches, and when we get to the sunflower, I'm going to show you that one again, because they can go in all the different directions here in the center of that, and they almost look like seed pods on the center of a flower or something like that, which is really kind of nice because it gives dimension, and it just kind of spruces it up really well on that type of thing. There is also um, several stitches. If you are a follower of Sue Spargo or Judith Montano, or you've done Brazilian embroidery, they're done just a little bit differently, but there's a drizzle stitch, which is a kind of a cast on stitch that you would use. And I want to share with you that if you do any type of stitch where you are wrapping the thread around the needle, you really need to be using a milliner's needle. The milliner's needle is long, but it is straight. It's the same distance even with the eye, and it's the same diameter. I think that's diameter. I'm not much of a math person. Um, but it's straight all the way up, and that makes it, when you pull it through, you don't get tangled up and have just a mess at the end where you can't pull your needle through, because an embroidery needle and other needles are wider at the top, and these are the same size all the way up and down. So you want to use a milliner's needle anytime that you would be wrapping anything. And so with the drizzle stitch, you're casting on a stitch where you pull it to yourself, towards yourself, and then it would slip off onto the needle. And it's very awkward to do this up, but so it's a cast on stitch, and then it's got a little loop here, and it makes for a really nice stitch on that. So it's called a drizzle, a bullion cast on stitch, and those look wonderful around a flower. So if you are a follower of Sue Spargo or Judith Montano, there's just some really wonderful stitches. Now, if you are doing this is raw edge applique and you're not going to be hand appliquing, your sewing machine probably has the blanket stitch on it, and that's a very popular stitch to go around the outside. And this is that stitch. This is basically a blanket stitch. And on my Bernina, it's stitch number 1332, because it goes kind of, at 1329, excuse me, is the straight blanket stitch. But for hand stitching and stuff, I'll take it at a slant. Now, there's another stitch, that's the 1332. Let me see if I can kind of draw that one on here, because this one also makes for a really nice stitch for especially a leaf. So this one, your sewing machine is going to start here. It's going to take a stitch down. It's going to go out and then come back, take a stitch down. It's going to go up the other direction and come back down. And so when that's coming up and down the leaf, it really gives a good leaf impression on there, or some dimension to that leaf. So that's on my Bernina, it's 1332. The blanket stitch is 1329. And then another one that's a lot of fun, that I will promise to show you again, is 115. So those are some of the stitches that I like to use when even though I may turn it, I want it to look like hand applique, and I'll use these stitches over turned applique, but they work beautifully over the raw edge applique, if many of you are doing that, especially those of you who have the die cuts and can make a lot of these cuts by die cut. And so again, I want to sincerely apologize to you that the camera, something happened here, and I really don't know what it is, because it was working just fine about 10 minutes before I went live. So for today, or this week, you're going to make those 5 flowers, either raw edge or you're going to turn them. And then around the outside of those flowers, you can, do the fly stitch, you can do a, bullion stitch, you can, lazy daisy or no stitches at all, and just sew it down with a blanket stitch or a very narrow zigzag with a monofilament thread, and then you wouldn't even see it. And I like to use the monofilament thread when I've done turned, but I want to sew it down with the machine, and I use a very narrow zigzag stitch. And then you can put all of those onto, make your pot and let it, position your flowers then on your fabric, and you can sew those all down. And then once we make section 3 blocks in 2 weeks, then we'll go back and we can put that pot on, as well as some of these flowers for the next section of 3, or at least get them made. And we have some pleated petals and things here that we'll be working on, and we'll go back and I will review these embellishments again, and that we were talking about in those stitches, and put those on. So right as of today, basically what we've completed is section 1 and put the flowers on. We've sewn the blocks for section 2, and that's the flowers we're going to be working on this week, and going back and putting our pot from section 1 onto that next step up. So we're starting to make progress on that. I think it's just going to be lovely. I'm loving it already, and I've been looking at the center of those daisies and thinking, maybe some French knots or a button, something fun in there. And I want to encourage all of you as you're making these, you know, if you want to change up a flower or something, if you like, you know, a different flower, better, that I hope you'll do it. How you embellish, I hope you tackle that as well, and work at finding a way to, you know, to embellish it so it becomes your quilt. And I also want to say that I have seen a few pictures that you've been putting up in the forum, and I love it. And a couple of you have privately sent me some pictures, and the diversity of what you're doing with this quilt just amazes me. So if you haven't had a chance to go into the forum, and you can see those in there, you'll have to take a look. And by, you know, next, in a couple of weeks or whatever, there may be enough that I'll share those during class time with you, because there's really different backgrounds, very different blocks, how those are going together. And I'm anxious to see what flowers are being chosen by some of you that have been putting your pictures up in the forum. And I do encourage you to do that. And if you have questions or you need help with something, please, I think my camera might have just, look, it came back. I don't know why. Isn't that strange? All right. Can I just go in reverse for a minute and share with you those stitches that I didn't do before? And let me start with the stitch that, I don't know if any of you know how to make a quilter's knot, but I just lay it over my finger. I put the needle on it. I twist it a couple of times, and for this, I'm using an embroidery needle, and I am using number 8 pearl cotton. And so with the, and I'm using green, simply, hopefully that it will show up better on camera. So then, so I come up next to my flower, hold that thread with my thumb away. Then I take a bite into it and come up again right at the edge of my flower. And that catches that thread in there. And I will keep doing that for, as you know, all the way around, if I'm going to, you know, if I want my blanket stitch to jut out like that. If I want it to go the other way, then I would take my stitch and I would bring this into the inside, and that's the way the sewing machine would do that stitch. And in fact, if my camera is working over here as well, which it is, let me share that a little bit with you. And this is stitch 1329, and I've got my 20 foot on my sewing machine, and I'm going to start down here because I want my needle to go in right at, and I would pull my bottom thread up, and then so it goes down, takes the bite in, comes down, takes the bite in, goes down, takes the bite in. And now I want to pivot that so that when it goes back in, it is going straight in at the point. And then when it comes back out, then I want it to come back down around. So then I'm going to take that in that way. And sometimes I will, it doesn't quite hit the edge, and I'll need to, hand turn it or place it. So I'm going to take that off for the moment so you can see that. And then I have my, my blanket stitch that goes around, and I would normally use, I have a green thread on here too, just simply so it would show up on the camera, but I would use a pink or something. This is a pink fabric, so I would use pink so that it kind of blends in with that, or I would use a monofilament. Then the other stitch that I was talking about is 1332, and that gives a little bit different look, but again, I want my needle to come in right at the edge, and I didn't take the time to shorten this. I would probably make it a little bit narrower. This is pretty wide, but it gives you a good idea of what it's going to look like. And so now I have these stitches that are going both in and out around that. And again, you could drop a French knot, a bead, something along those places where it connects if you wanted to add more embellishment to that. And then so those are just some really fun possibilities for that, but you have hundreds of stitches on your sewing machine, so I'm sure that you will find one that you absolutely love. And then with the milliners, just to make a bullion knot, just to show you how easy that comes off with I'm going to go out here because I've got this red. So I bring my needle up. I'm going to wrap this I decided, and you don't want to pull it tight when you're wrapping it, and then you want to bring that, the end of that all the way down to the bottom of the thread, and get that. But look how easily that pulls through when you have a milliner's needle that just goes all the way in. And I was looking up at the camera and making sure you could see it, and I didn't get that quite all the way down. But what is really cool about this, you can go back and kind of work it a little bit. But when you do it properly, and you bring it all the way back down here instead of leaving that tail out there. So let me, just so you can see the full effect. Okay, so I bring that down, and this, it makes a little loop around, and so then now I would take this and bring it back down where at the end of my little knot, and I would straighten that out, and I have these little circles that are going to go around that flower and make for kind of like little leaves around there. So that's a bullion. I kind of like the cast on one because it's a little bit bigger, and I would use a thicker thread sometimes for that, or use more wraps around this. This was 12 wraps. I like to get about 20 because it makes a nice open circle on that. So as far as a bullion, And those other stitches, all of those work really good, or a chain stitch, a lazy daisy. And if you've never made, a lazy daisy stitch, they're quite easy too. And so you would come up with your lazy daisy, and again you're going to leave that loop there. You're going to come back down pretty much where you came up, right next to it, and then you're going to leave that some loop, and then decide how big of a chain that you want. I don't like mine real thick around that. So then you pull it, and again, don't pull overly tight. You would then put this back in at the top, and you would come down and make your next stitch. And you have your lazy daisy stitches that would go all the way around, and it makes for also a very nice look around the edge of your flower. So those are some possibilities for embellishment on those flowers. And then going back to the apple pop, because the center of this larger one is exactly what that circle needs to be. I starch my fabric first, and then I lay it over top, face down, the pretty side down. You put the ring in, and you push it in, and then you're going to trim off around that fabric. And it's really easy to do because your scissors just kind of lays up against the metal circle. And then you would bring it to the iron, and here is where, because the metal does get hot, and so this is where I would use this cool little finger caught, or whatever this is called exactly. Fingertip stiletto is what it's called. And that just keeps your hand away from the metal, because the metal gets a little warm. And I just kind of let it sit there for a second, spin that around, keep that coming up, and using the stiletto there, and working my way entirely around and then you're going to come out. I'm going to leave that sit there to cool, and you're going to end up with a really nice circular ring there that looks really good. If you want to use one of the circle makers to do that. Now, when I do the fly stitch, sometimes I will take a ring or a circle like this, and I will use my friction pen, and I will draw around this ring so that I can keep an even, so that when I do the fly stitch and I bring from the edge of that and I bring it in, I can keep the stem part even all the way around, and that just makes for it to look really really nice on that. So how that would look, you would have your fly stitch coming off, and then you take that stitch down, and you would keep doing that all the way across. So, and you get that nice look. But I like to draw the ring there because it just makes it work really nicely for that. So I do recommend this Quilter Select Applique. This is what the package looks like, and What is really nice about it is that this side is the fusible. You can draw on this paper side, and I will say that the Applique pencils mark on this really well, whereas other pencils kind of dig into the paper and don't show up as well. And these charcoal pencils work really well on this paper. Then when you take the front paper off, your back, if I were to remove this now, I could remove that paper, and this is going to stay sticky. And I can move it, and it's going to remain sticky for that. So I can position all my flowers and have that available to me. So hopefully today wasn't too confusing with the whole camera issue, and I'm not sure what happened there because I didn't do anything to repair it. I didn't do anything to break it. So thank you for your patience on that. Just thank you. And I will see you in 2 weeks. I'm going to give myself a week to get set up in our new home with all of this, and we'll be back for section number 3, and we'll start with that. And in the meantime, enjoy your summer. If you're vacationing, enjoy it. Be safe, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Goodbye.